Hi, my friend, it's Pat Sloan here, and we have two big things to talk about today. First is the Serendipity charity auction for Make-A-Wish is up and running. So that means my quilt, which here's my quilt, is up for auction, and so is the Fat Quarter Shop's quilt, which is the original in that gorgeous navy background. Corey Yoder also has her Serendipity quilt up for auction, plus two Socialites quilts that the Fat Quarter Shop did during all of their sew-alongs for that, where Kimberly was making the blocks. They put those in, and they have those two quilts up for auction. So it is an auction extravaganza to support Make-A-Wish, which is amazing. For those of you who have been looking to bid on a quilt of mine, here's your chance to get my Serendipity, which has to be one of my all-time favorites, made with my Morrison Park fabric. I don't know, I might have to bid against you. I don't know. I have a lot of quilts, so maybe you'll win the bid. Okay, the other part of today is that I want to oh wait, one more thing before I go. For those of you doing the old school, I have not done my old school block of the month yet, but Kim had an update to her pattern because you needed to trim the center down just a little bit, and she forgot that in the pattern, so it's in there now, so you can go over and get a new version. I will do my block maybe on Saturday. Yes. Okay, let's talk about neutrals part 2 because there was a lot of questions, and I thought, let me walk through it in a little more detail and tell you how I think about it. So this whole thing about what is a neutral fabric is all about how I think about it. I have taught what I would call color classes for almost 20 years. I did a workshop called Mama's Garden, and basically it was a color class, sort of hidden in there. But that's what I did. So I've learned a lot about how all of you look at color. I learned a lot about how I look at color, which is a little bit differently than you do. So I had to develop terminology to help me express what it was that I was trying to get across. And using the word neutral in a slightly different way than you might use it is one of those words. So there are two other words out there that a fabric can be in all three categories. They're categories to me in my brain, and that is low volume. So those of you who have been quilting for the last 10 years have probably heard the term low volume, particularly if you're a modern quilter. Then there's neutrals. Neutrals, how everybody thinks of them, and then neutrals taking it maybe to the next level of thinking is like how I think about neutrals, and tone on tones. So a fabric could be a low volume, a neutral, and a tone on tone. And I want to show you with some different color bundles, and also with my quilt here, Jane's Jewel Box, which is the quilt from Teach Me to Sew Triangles. It's one of the quilts in there. It is using a charm pack and a background. And my background on here is a neutral, and that neutral is what color? Tick tock, tick tock. It's red. I use a red. Rather than white or off-white or a little tiny polka dot, I used a solid red. So let me show you with tans and creams what are low volumes, what are neutrals, the base of what people call neutrals, and what are tone on tones. Okay, we'll first come down and, well, first let me, okay, before we go there, first let me tell you that low volume is a term that about 10 years ago, my friend Malka Dubrowski coined in an article she wrote for Quilting Arts. I will link it down below in the description box, and while you're there, click the subscribe, hit the like button for me. All of those help my small family business. It's free. It just lets you know that you want to find my videos again. All right, Malka is a modern quilter, but she is also a fabric dyer. Her business is to dye deep, rich jewel tones of fabric, bright fabrics. This is her business, is dyeing fabric. And so she wrote this article because she said that sometimes when she's working with so much rich color, think about like this, that she needed to have a break, and design was something that was low volume. It wasn't so loud in color, it was low in color, low volume. And for her that meant not much color. So when you hear the word low volume, you're talking about colors that are creams, whites, beiges, those, maybe very light tan. It is a specific color range of specific lights, and mostly white reading backgrounds, and lots of it. So let's look at what I pulled for low volume, and I'll scoot you in here, because with these are low volumes that I have, and they are all with some pattern, and the amount of pattern varies. It could be sort of very light like this, where it's reading like almost starts to read solid from a distance. Here's one that I showed you yesterday with the little flowers on it. Then I have, like, this could be low volume because it's still reading very much a white cream background with those mushrooms. Same with this, the pineapples. There are images, but they're not overtaking the design as far as the color of the fabric. Don't think about this as a mushroom. Think about it as a beige fabric with some brown lines on it. Here's a map fabric, which is a little bit more dense than this. You see, there's more white in this. There's more light in the background showing than in the map, but I still consider the map a low volume. And this is going to be your idea. There's no rules. There's no quilt police that come in and tell you, nah, it's your idea. Here is a low volume that's aqua. So you still read this from a distance. It's got that little bit of aqua, but it's not a high contrast. It's very low contrast, and that's what is keeping with low volume. Things that were sort of toned back. Some gorgeous leaves, and honey jar squirters. It's like that. See, they're the jars that got with the honey in them. Okay, so that is low volume. Would any of these be a tone on tone? A tone on tone is fairly specific. It's another thing. Just like a low volume, tone on tone are fabrics that really read solid from a distance, and they have very little contrast. None of these would I consider tone on tone. This would come the closest because as I pull it back, but it's still got multiple colors. It is not different shades. If these were different shades of the same thing, of this background, then I would consider that a tone on tone. This is not. Okay, what is a tone on tone? Here are some from that I pulled. This one I think is very classic. It could be even less contrast because as I pull back I can still see those images. Personally, I don't buy many tone on tone, so it's hard to find something. This is low contrast. It's probably still too much contrast for tone on tone. The same with this one. And then of course these are fabrics that are neither. They're none of these categories. They have white backgrounds, but they have lots of other colors and they have high contrast, and so these are not low volume. They are not tone on tone. They are not neutrals. But what would be a neutral? I would consider everything here a neutral, because for me, I'm looking at something that I could use as a background to a block, what I consider the background portion of a block. It's not going to compete too much. It's going to give me some interest. And so I would use all of these things here that way. Okay, but let's look at some other colors. I just pulled for visualizing a tone on tone. This is a yellow with a barely lighter yellow design on it. But the same pattern in orange is much more high contrast. So this is not a tone on tone. I've got some in greens, which I did find some tone on tones. So come on in here. Of course, there's no low volume anymore because low volume is only fabrics that have whites, creams, beiges. There are no colors in low volume. So these are tone on tones. This is a grunge fabric, which is a fabric line that Moda puts out, and it has varying levels of how much other kind of color there is. Here is a really classic tone on tone because it's a text print, but the text is only a couple shades darker than the background. These are, to me, these are the neutrals. They could read as background. They have varying degrees of prints, but they don't have a lot of other color. And then these two are just not not tone on tone and not neutral. They are other fabrics that you use. Let me show you the red, because then we're going to go to the quilt on the wall. Okay, for the red option, this is really a true classic tone on tone. It's a Benartex line. It has this sort of line work in it, which is really nice. And that comes in a lot of different colors. And when you pull it back, it will have a little bit of texture that you'll see rather than a solid, but it reads very solid. These are what I call my neutrals, because they have a little bit of design, a little bit more design, and then even a little bit stronger design. And I'm going to show you these up on the quilt behind me. And of course there's no low volume here at all, because there's no white background fabrics like this. And then other fabrics. These are not tone on tone and they're not neutral. They're just other red fabrics. I want to show you, I'll put some of those red neutrals up on, and the tone on tone up here on my Jane's Jewel box. What I'm going to do is just hold it here. So if I were to audition that fabric, this would look just slightly different than the red solid that's in this quilt. Not a lot different, but a little bit different. It'll give a little bit more movement to what's there instead of having that sort of flat look that a solid has. There's lots of these textured, I call them textured fabrics, tone on tones. All right, if I did, this is a Blossom, which right now is this month on sale. The Blossom fabrics was my all-time favorite basic. Basic is another term that people use for these fabrics. See, there's a lot of different terms that are flying around out there. So I'm using this as a neutral, and here it is up there. This would have been fabulous. It didn't exist when I made this quilt, but it would have been fabulous. It will not compete with the charm pack, and it gives just a little bit of pop, like using a random, it's basically a little random flower, like think of a little random dot. Now the other ones get a little more tricky, because you need to decide, do you want like the whole quilt with something like this neutral as the border? You know, that has a lot more pattern on it, and you know, maybe you love that, sort of like that Valentine piece that I did with all the big polka dot as the background. It was a little bit too much, but some of you liked it. And the same with this one. This one has a higher contrast. This is a lower contrast color, the design. This is higher contrast, and the higher contrast is going to be even more tricky, that it doesn't bleed into the others, but it could be really fabulous, and it really would depend on your charm pack. Maybe if you did like a batik charm pack, where the colors of these charm packs would be basically tone on tone, or neutrals, or you know, the batiks are more even colored, then something like this would be super cool for the border. I want to show you real quick. Here is a dot that I did in the mermaid quilt on this block, on this basket block. So you can see how that dot worked as a background. And then I actually had the dot, I put it in other blocks. So there's the dot there. And that dot has multiple colors in it. That's a neutral to me. It would also probably be considered a low volume, because there's a lot of white showing. Like the more I pull it back, it's not a tone on tone. A tone on tone would be just the white background and then a slightly darker, the same shade, the same color dot. Now a few of you asked, could I do a block and put some of those fabrics with the white background, my red, white, and blue? So here's the red, white, and blue. I put one of these fabrics with multiple colors, and here's another one with multiple colors. So you can see what it looks like. It doesn't look weird. It doesn't look odd. Those would be neutrals. They would be low volume in this case, because they have white backgrounds. And if I put it, come down real quick. If I put it on here, just like to audition it, there you go. So you can see how it looks. There, it blends in wonderfully. You don't like look at this and see just that one. And here's another plaid over here that has multiple colors. So there you go. Very much a terminology thing. So I hope that this was interesting, and that if you enjoyed that, let me know in the comments. If you have other questions about low volume, see the article below in the description. And because you can look at home decorating, you can see walls that a whole room will be done in red walls or navy walls. So just like red is a neutral. And then you have tone on tone, which are things that read very, very solid and can be any color. It's not color oriented like low volumes are. All right, my friend, I love you. Mwah. See you online.